and we're delighted to be here for this WISER seminar. And we're going to give a report from the Disastershock Global Volunteer Team on its pandemic stress reduction project. I'm going to begin by asking my colleagues to introduce themselves, and maybe Sue, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, sure. Hello, I'm glad to be here. It's nice to be with you. My name is Sue Schaefer, and I recently retired in the last couple of months from 25 years of teaching at the University of San Francisco on the adjunct faculty in the counseling department. I knew Brian there, but previously we also had met when I was at USF getting my doctorate many years ago, and we did the work on this project then. In addition to teaching, I have been for the last 25 years on first a consultant, but then eventually a director of the clinical program at a local agency in Palo Alto, California. It's a grief agency that works only with victims of grief and loss and trauma. And I directed the clinical program there, working with groups of young master's students who were getting their hours to become licensed in the state of California. Additionally, worked with disaster response teams and hospice, and I have a private practice in Menlo Park that's mostly focused around grief and loss. Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, Damian, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Are you listening?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, my name is Damian Gallegos Lemos. I'm Ecuadorian, but living in Madrid for the past 8 years. I work in the Ministry of Health. I'm an MD and family physician. I met this group through Sue, who was my exchange student mother a lot of years ago. And we've been in touch, and then since I also trained as a systemic family therapist, I offered to work in this project, and I was very excited to be part of the Spanish translation team for Disastershock. And out of some things in Ecuador, I worked with multi-problematic families due to conflicts derived from migration, and that's my mental health background. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Damian. Okay, Jackie, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Brian. Brian and I go back a while at USF as Sue Schaefer as well. That was for my doctoral program. And then as of 7 years ago, I transplanted from San Francisco back to New York City. But basically my heart still is in both places, East Coast and West Coast. My background has been very interested in family therapy since the days of USF, and has continued with my work there in the Child Development Center. And then on the transport over to the East Coast, I'm an adjunct professor speaking about family therapy in urban settings, which is very appropriate for what's going on today, needing family therapy in this urban setting related to the pandemic, which is very helpful now with my training. The other point of reference is I have private practice in New York City, and the problem's still the same as the East Coast and West Coast, so no difference there. There is something different in my work, and that's with NYU Bellevue Hospital. And I'm teaching third-year psychiatric residents the art of family therapy, which they're so amazed how different it is from individual. And I've enjoyed that up until recently, when all the psychiatrists were taken off their psychiatry division and put on the med-surg floors because of the influx of patients. That was a very big shock to their system. I also am on the board of the Family and Child Development Center still, after 30 years still, and also the Institute of School-Based Family Therapy, And that is another project that Brian is involved in with the Oxford Symposium. I feel very connected to both sides of the states of the United States, East and West. But as you know, the New York City is the epicenter of this pandemic. So there'll be a lot to talk about this material of disaster shock today. Thank you, Brian. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jackie. Ning Tang is an assistant professor at St. Joseph's University in Macau, which is a special administrative region for China. And she is the coordinator of the social work program there. And her great passion is working with social workers in China. She's not able to be with us today because it's 2 a.m. right now in China, but she's made a video and she will do a video presentation a little further on in our seminar. I'm currently the chief academic advisor for the West Institute for Social Research, and have been a faculty member also with WISER for the last 6 years. Formerly, I was chair of the counseling psychology department at the University of San Francisco. And we're going to now tell you about this pandemic stress reduction project, which has only been functioning for about 6 weeks. So I'm going to go to our beginnings. And we had our beginnings in 1989 when the Loma Prieta earthquake took place in San Francisco. And those of us who are older members will remember this, especially if we were living in San Francisco. A span of the Bay Bridge collapsed. You can see the collapsed span here. One person was killed there when their car went over the edge. And the Nimitz Freeway, which was a 3-level freeway in Oakland, collapsed and killed 42 people. And pictures like this, as well as part of the city being on fire, were played on the news daily for weeks and weeks. And I have to tell you, it was traumatic. And I was living at the time, I had been on leave in San Francisco at Cal State LA. And I decided not to move back to San Francisco for almost a year because every time I came into the city, everybody was so tense. So in the context of this disaster, and it was a small disaster, comparison of many world disasters, there are 63 deaths, almost 4,000 injuries, and there was about $13 billion in property damage. And what I found was when we looked at the sort of written advice that was given to families, particularly about children, it tended to be very vague. And this is a current printout from the Red Cross. And you will see down here at the bottom, if you have children, give them extra time, hugs and patience, provide them reassurance. All very good advice, but not very detailed in terms of how do you actually give the reassurance? What sort of things do you do with the extra time? How do you actually listen to your child? So we felt that there was a need for something more specific. And so at the time, I was a professor at the University of San Francisco, and my colleague Emily Giroux and I were both professors in the counseling psychology department, and Sue Schaefer and Suzanne Gerardo and Valerie Appleton were all recent graduates who are working as interns in the Center for Child and Family Development, providing counseling to people in the Bay Area. And so we decided to write a book that we could distribute free electronically to families, and it was called Disastershock: How to Cope with the Emotional Stress of a Major Disaster. And this book has been through four editions. This is the 4th edition cover. We had a different cover on it in 1989, but we distributed it free over the internet to anyone who wanted it and everybody we could think of. We also made audio tapes that we distributed in 10 different languages. And so there you can see the seeds for the project that we did in the last 6 weeks. So the chapters from the book are shown here. Part 1 deals with 10 approaches to lowering your stress. all of these approaches are cognitive behavior therapy approaches. They all have a very strong evidence base for effectiveness in terms of research in general. And the second part had to do with how to help your child cope. So our thinking was, part one was very important because we wanted parents and guardians, teachers, anybody working with children to lower their stress first. It's kind of like on the airplane when the airplane loses oxygen and the mask drops. The message is put it on your face first, then on your child's face. So we wanted the adults to be able to lower their stress, because when an adult is calm, then the children will tend to be calmer. So the second part dealt with these techniques for how to help your child, how to identify when your child is stressed, how to reassure your child, which is a section that Sue wrote, how to listen to so your child will talk to you, our therapy approaches to lowering stress. And then we had 10 techniques. We've increased them now to 12. We added 2 that were more focused on the pandemic. But you will see in the 12 techniques that are listed here, method 1 through 12, there's kind of a recurrent theme of some of the techniques that were taught to the parents. And the final part was part 3, which is internet resources. So you can see here, I've taken just the first part of method 1 for deep breathing. You can see that it's very detailed. It tells you how to do each part of the technique. So here it's asking the adult to take a slow, deep breath for 2 seconds and then hold them for a count of 1, 2, and then let it slowly out through the nose and so forth. And then we increase it to 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds until you're breathing slowly and deeply. For method 12, family meeting, we have some basic instructions. And a family meeting is where the family, at least once a week or maybe twice a week, depending on what's happening, meets for 30 to 45 minutes. And there's a structure to the meeting, and everybody has a turn for 2 to 3 minutes to speak. But while that person's speaking, only they can speak. And it's structured through the use of something called a speaker's permit, like a stuffed animal and ball. Only that person holding the object, holding the speaker's permit, is allowed to speak. And so our thinking behind this was that everybody's kind of a prisoner at home during this pandemic. Things are getting very tense. How can you talk about what's going on in a way that people can be heard? And we think family meeting, which is a widely used Adlerian counseling technique, was a good example of that. So in the book, we have a detailed example of how the parents could lead the meeting and what a conversation would look like. And here the daughter's upset because her brother keeps changing the TV channel whenever she wants to watch. And so the example goes on and shows you what to do. So that's kind of the focus of the book that made it unique, is that we're very detailed and we go step by step. Here's what you do, here's how you do it, so that a parent can learn the technique and then use it with his or her child as well as their own family adult members. So at the time that we did this, we were very aware that in a disaster, there are not enough mental health therapists to go around. And so we thought having something, a short book that was only like 40 pages long, that could be easily read, would be helpful. And at the time, I thought of this kind of like a Band-Aid. Kind of, if you really had a problem, you got to talk to a therapist. But if you've ever needed a Band-Aid, you know that a Band-Aid is very helpful. So I had always assumed that face-to-face counseling was more effective than learning from a self-help book. And the technical term for that is bibliotherapy. I should tell you that it's raining like crazy here now, and there's a thunderstorm. And so if I lose contact, Sue will take over the meeting from me. So this issue is bibliotherapy. Can self-help be as effective as face-to-face counseling? I had assumed that this statement was false until 4 years ago, when I actually went and looked at the research. I discovered that it's true. And I found these studies, which we were will shortly, in a day or two, post on our Disastershock website. Many of these were randomized control group studies where they took adults who were very anxious or very depressed and randomly assigned them to a bibliotherapy group or a face-to-face counseling group. And the results showed that the bibliotherapy was as effective. So I thought this was encouraging, and I think we need to not be dismissive of the learning that comes from self-learning. So between 2001 and 2020, this is how disaster shock was used. After 9/11 in 2001, the terrorist attack in the World Trade Center, I formed my students into teams, and each team took one of the 50 states in the United States and distributed digitally to mental health centers and organizations within each state. And then I didn't use it very much. We posted on the USF website, and it's still there for anybody to see and take down for free. We always wanted it to be free. But in 2016, after I had retired from USF and was now working with Wiser, there were a whole series of terrorist attacks in Paris, Brussels, Lahore, and San Bernardino. And the San Bernardino attacks that killed, I think, 12 people who were shot to death. I lived like an hour from there in the Palm Springs area. And so I felt personally touched by this. I thought, well, gee, what can I do? And I thought, well, wait a minute. We had this disaster shock book. So I started sending it out myself to organizations and people in those different cities. In 2017, it was distributed after the Ariana Grande concert that was a terrorist bomb that, and then the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa. In 2018, it was distributed in Guatemala, where there was a volcanic eruption that killed more than 200 people. The Parkland, Florida shooting, we distributed to about 100 schools within a 30-mile radius of Parkland after that. And then we distributed at the Paradise Fire in California, that destroyed that town, and after a tsunami in Sumatra. And then in 2019, you can see we distributed also to these disaster areas in Egypt, Pakistan, Houston, and in Mozambique. And beginning in 2020, there was flooding in Jakarta in January. And then along came the pandemic. So I'm going to let Sue describe now the formation in April 2020 of the Disastershock Global Volunteer Team. These are our members.
Okay, I'm going to tell this story from a bit of a personal perspective of how this team has come to be. It's really kind of an incredible story. So as I mentioned in my introductory remarks that I recently retired, and I was sort of anticipating things being very quiet, and I actually enrolled in a very interesting class at Stanford that has to do with ambassadors of compassion training through the Stanford School of Medicine. Was looking for a project to do, but things were, relatively quiet in the first few weeks. And then an email came from Brian Gerard in my inbox, when having not heard from him for 20 or more years or something like that. It was 30, thank you. I remembered him, but I remembered him well, but had really not really remembered that we'd worked on this project together. So he reminded me that we had written this book and explained that he was glad to find me, and I was hoping that I might be interested in helping with an update that could be useful during the pandemic. And I had to really be reminded, what was it again? Which section did I write? And so we spoke within a day, I'm sure, and put our heads together and kind of came up with an idea of how we might start. Brian continues to refer to this as building the airplane as you fly it, and because the project has moved so quickly. But what we started with was, in my case, I had just left my CARA responsibilities with a very dynamic team of that had been very diverse and talented and bright and represented a number of different cultures. So I thought they might be willing, because they spoke a number of languages, to help, and I contacted them. So there was China, India, Australia, Germany right there, and they all said, oh yes, we would love to be involved in a project like this. We could help find translators, or we could translate. And a couple of other just immediate thoughts were, having enjoyed a lot of world travel and having had exchange students, of which Damian was one, I thought, what about all my families that I love and care about? And contacted them, and lo and behold, everyone said, oh, we'd love to be involved in that. And immediately a number of other countries were sort of right up for grabs there. And meanwhile, Brian was working on his end, contacting numbers of academics, professors, other people he knew in academia and on the Oxford Symposium, and got immediate responses within certainly, if not hours, days. My compassion group at Stanford, which is also represented a group of 60 people all over the world, with an expressed interest in helping spread, alleviate suffering and help in any way to represent a compassionate stance. And so I sent out an email to my group and got quite a number of responses saying, I would be happy to translate. I would love to be part of this. And so within just a relatively short time, probably less than a week, we had a rather amazing response. And as I think about it, it wasn't like recruiting a team. It was like people were there waiting. And some of it may have, certainly the nature of this wonderful group as a whole, but the other thing was that people were mostly by now sheltering in place. And I think feeling that there would be, it was a wonderful opportunity, as they expressed, to be able to do something constructive and helpful. And so within a very short period of time, we had people working on this and recruiting their own teams. And I'll give you an example. Just how easy this was, as I called a close colleague of mine and said, you need to know what happened this week. I got this email, and I was telling her about it. She's a therapist. She was my partner on the team at CARA. And in the middle of the conversation, she said, just a minute, my son's sitting next to me on the sofa here, and he wants to talk to you. He overheard this conversation. And he took the phone. I'd met him once before. He said, my name's Seth Hamlin. I'm home from New York before I start graduate school in Berkeley. I've heard what you've said. This sounds like a fascinating project, and I'd be glad to build a website. So it almost was like just acknowledging that there was this need, and then having people just step into an immediate place where they could not only be enthusiastic about it, but really contribute. And therefore, we have arrived here. There are now it's only been 5 or 6 weeks, there are 80 some members from all over the world. They have translated this. It's begun in 22 languages.
Yes.
There are 10 or 11 up live on the website, which is now up. And the others are being completed rapidly, and people are beginning to embrace the idea of distribution. So this is an example of what it looks like on the website with both the Spanish, and this is probably the Mandarin. There's a Mandarin and a Cantonese version that are complete and ready to go. And they're, again, downloaded free. We're trying to get them in both PDF versions and also EPUB versions so that they convert to be able to be seen on all different kinds of devices. This is it's the Disastershock website. So when you log on, this is what you see first. Of course, just the book, and underneath that you can download it. It talks about Disastershock, shows you the team of 80 people, and invites people to join us if they would like to. And they can also download all the versions of the languages that are available with the note that others are coming soon. As you scroll down, you see the team. It grows, it changes. I think probably every day it changes, and we add more people. And you can see the diversity and the places that are represented around the globe, because of course this disaster it touches every community and every culture and every country, every human being. And fortunately, we have been able to go a great deal beyond what Brian has really carried this project from the beginning, but it took quite a step forward with the spread to a global kind of audience.
Sue is very modest. She is the architect of our global team because she knows more people from different countries than anyone I've ever met. And they're all friends of hers. And so very quickly, 2/3 of these people from different countries, they were all her associates.
Well, and the beautiful thing was, from my compassion team at Stanford, from the applied ambassadors of compassion group, so one or two people joined. One of them joined Damian's Spanish team, but then as she got started with, Sandra got started working on that team, she said, my husband speaks Portuguese and he would like to contribute as well. Could he recruit a team and do it? And we would say, of course, well, sure, we'd love to have him. And other members. There's also been a team from the Czech Republic. They said, we don't speak Czech ourselves, but we'd like to find a translator and pay them, and we'll help facilitate, get this up on the website. So it's just been amazing what people have been willing to do. There's an art group that wants to do art to help children, and it's been really remarkable. So it's been quite a privilege to do this. I just want to say it's inspiring, and we look forward to our weekly meetings. We meet for 1 hour on Zoom on Saturday mornings, and usually have somewhere between 20 to 40 or more people who share part of the inspiration as they talk about, we want to have time to welcome new people here, what's going on in their countries, and then also support each other in whatever is needed in terms of next steps. So some of the distribution strategies that we have identified are hoping to get it out to school districts, government departments, mental health, education, universities, mayor's offices, city hall, governors, so the political element, religious organizations, churches and synagogues, politicians, emergency room services, the Red Cross. But these are just ideas, and actually what comes up is more specifically, especially within individual countries, people have their own sense of where the best place to go or begin would be. So
she did Doctors Without Borders.
Oh, don't we wish? We would love to have contact there. They're on
I
our.
can give you some.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So next is going to be, we're going to turn to Damian Gallegos Lemos and let him describe the work of his Spanish team, which has been a wonderful example of what's possible.
Damian, I have your slides here. I can show them if you like, or I can pass the control to you.
I made some new slides, Brian, so I'm going to share
okay. Okay, you go ahead.
Okay, so are you all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so this first of all, I want to thank Brian and Sue for everything they've done. This is very an inspirational project, and I think I talk for everybody involved in this project. Brian suggested some bullets to go over, so I thought that was the way to go. It's going to be very short. I won't try to read this, but this is the Spanish team. Selena, who is a psychologist from Argentina, Sandra, also with mental health training, and she lives in the Bay Area, and she's part of the compassion group Sue mentioned before. Sawyer is the youngest of our group, is a third-year degree student of psychology and Hispanic studies in Columbia University. And then Eliana, who also part of that Applied Compassion Academy, who offers to collaborate it with the project, and me, living here in Madrid, and I wanted to. I have a very strong management profile because of my training as a public health and an MBA. So it was so easy, because when you have a very committed team, and besides that, with such great characteristics, not only academic, but in the human side. So it was a very good. It was a pleasure to work with these people. Then Brian suggested to and that's how in the meetings, in the Zoom meetings that Sue was referring, we asked the new members to present themselves, and then to talk about how it is going in their own countries or cities. Actually, today we had a new member from Nigeria, and she was telling us about it. So I come from a systemic training. I'm a family physician, but I did a master's degree in family therapy, and that was I call them like a set of glasses that help me see reality and see life like never before. So I apply it to everything in my life. When I'm bearing my children, or working in a meeting or anything. So I was seeing the systemic of COVID, of the pandemic, and the relationship of Spain and Ecuador. Spain is where I live, and is the 4th country in the world with most cases detected. And I call that the one thing that formed a perfect storm. So if you follow the letter B, in 1999, there was a huge crisis in Ecuador. The whole bank system collapsed, and we switched from our current currency to the dollars, and it was a terrible disaster, and a lot of people migrated to all around the world, especially Spain and Italy and the United States. And to see how important this migration was, is that almost $600 million are sent every year. That's about 0.6 of our of Ecuador's gross domestic product, and almost 500,000 people is living Ecuadorians are living in Spain. So for Ecuador, was the perfect storm. We're talking here, if you see here up there, Spain has, according to the World Health Organization, the 7th best health system, and here we are struggling. Ecuador has ranked 111, and it is due to those low middle income countries systems that are, very neglected. So the perfect storm was a lot of migrant holiday trips from people going to visit, and especially at that time of the year, where the carnival celebrations were taking place. A lot of every single little town was hiring artists to go and do huge celebrations, and that added to a poor, neglected health system just was the perfect storm. This is a headline of one journal, actually from here, from Spain, talking about Guayaquil city, which is the biggest city in Ecuador. And it was like no space in hospitals and cemeteries. Over 2,000 corpses have been collected in Guayaquil, and most of them have at least 9 days of decomposing. So it was a very, very hard situation. And here I posted a couple pictures that give some context of Latin America. And this is how stay at home looks like for big part of the population in Latin America. So it is very difficult to talk about social, and I want to be very clear in this, is social, is physical distance, no social distance. Social distance is this picture. Physical distance is what will keep you safe from COVID. So it is very hard for these people that live by the day to keep that physical distance and not going to sell their daily work. So this is how I saw it, and picking up how is the exercise during our presentations in the Zoom meetings we do. Then the idea was to tell you about the process of the translation. So it is very interesting because it is how life is this new normal kind of thing. So it's a lot of, first of all, getting together. And we have to say, as Brian mentioned, the networking led by Sue and Brian was amazing. And then it just felt right. Everybody started emails going back and forth, teleconferencing, Google Drive. Even we have a colleague named David Shop. He teaches formatting on Google Drive, giving a short course of an hour to whoever wants to do it, to help the team's work. And then the part 3 was led by Selena, and we all collaborated with her, and we give her some material as well, adapting some of the resources, in video or web pages, to the Spanish-speaking community, and then the result was amazing. You know, here are some of
On the counter.
Yeah, I know. I gotta tell Jorge something. I'll be right back.
Here's are some of the comments of my colleagues. You know, like for instance, you can read that they talk about commitment, inspiration, the level of effort and compassion shown within is an example of human kindness. It was very moving. It was a very interesting process. So the distribution strategies that were mentioned before, actually in the Spanish team, are starting to be current distribution. They're being distributed in Argentina, with help of Selena, in different places, universities, School of Psychology, also for instance, in Sandra sent it to a NGO called Minicor that works with the parents and in one of the poorest areas of Colombia, called Medellin, which is the second biggest city in Colombia. And then of course they were also like Sawyer put it in her hometown of Davis, and also in Columbia University. And then I started to move some of I've been working in public health, so I have contacts in the National Emergency Operations Committees that usually work with this, and also put on some universities in the psychology department. And one of the things I've been working since the last 10 years is telehealth. and different services. So I work for also I help to the platform that offers telehealth of general medicine and as well as mental health care. And it's called Family Card, and they posted in a blog like this. So they put it, and then down there you can see that they can download the whole book from the web page. So this is how one of the teams are working. So first translation, and then whoever feels like it, and in the Spanish team, it was being everybody it was up to the second part of the job, which is distributing. And as Brian says, if the second part is even it's even more important, because we want to put it out there and help as many people as we want. And just finishing with this, we were very happy to also help Jackie in this because some of the places that she wanted to go ahead and put it right away for distribution, we're asking for the Spanish part, especially in New York, and she will tell this, I guess, and so we feel that we wanted to do that, and it was very exciting as well. So that's it, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Damian. You could take your share screen off. Very good. Professor Ning Tang is not able to be here because it's 2 a.m. in 2:30 in China right now, but she's made a video for us describing her work. And I'm gonna, so 5-minute video, I'm gonna go ahead and play that.
Hello, my name is Ning Tan. I am working at the University of St. Joseph in Macau as a social work assistant professor and program coordinator. I helped with the translation work of Disastershock in both Mandarin and Cantonese. The members of the Mandarin team include Zhu Ruoyun, Deng Shuyu, Wu Yuan, Su Zhenrong, Zhang Jiayuan, Fan Xingyue. These volunteers were found and organized by a local agency in China called Darling Consulting. And the members of the Cantonese team include Philip Yuan, Julian Lam, Joanna Wang, Valerie Leong. They are from Caritas Macau. The outbreak of COVID-19 started in China during the most important holiday of China, which is Chinese New Year. So during that time, the majority of Chinese people went back to their hometown to be together with their family. I was able to experience the nationwide quarantine with my family in countryside. So luckily, I was not affected much by this outbreak personally, and I had the time and energy to help others in more critical situation. I provided a couple of free online trainings for professionals with the topics such as psychological first aid. And I also worked with the agency Darling Consulting in providing some free webinars and other trainings. So I was paying a great attention to online resources and network. That's how I noticed the message about the need to find volunteers to translate Disastershock. And I read this manual, and I thought it was very helpful for Chinese families as well. So I contacted Professor Brian Gerard immediately. And I contacted Darling Consulting, who was willing to find volunteers very quickly, and they finished the translation in Mandarin within 1 month. Later on, I came back to Macau to teach online courses for my university. I contacted Macau Caritas to see if they are willing to translate in Cantonese. They expressed a great interest in this book. Besides translation work, they also offer to produce hundreds of hard copies of this book and donate them to local schools and social service agencies. They are also planning to provide some workshops for local professionals to make sure that they know how to use this manual for individuals and families in need. And in mainland China, Darling Consulting published a fine article for Chinese readers to explain very well about the background and the major contents of this book. Over 5,000 subscribers of Darling Consulting received the book through online links, and they were able to freely download the book and share it with other people. Darling Consulting is also planning to have an online book workshop, like book club, for readers and users. So that's pretty much the distribution work that's still going on. And it's a great honor to be part of this international team. I hope with the help of this book, people all over the world can get through this difficult time with more power and more confidence. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was Ning. And what surprised me there was, to be frank, I wasn't quite sure our book would be culturally relevant in China. So I'm surprised to find that it is. So we thought that was encouraging. Dr. Scheinfeld will now talk about the distribution team working in New York. Jackie?
Thank you, everyone. You know, the points of reference that I wanted to bring out first were, number one, all of us are in the business of taking care of people and trying to be helpful. And, you know, in the counseling business that we're in, it's as if to say, what other opportunities besides education and your own practice can you do? This was what excited me about the project. And that was, number one, it was a rapid response to this particular pandemic, because living in New York City, I'm in the epicenter, and it's all around us here. And I would have been feeling so helpless to look at all the avenues of where I could be helpful besides my private practice and working in a hospital setting. But the reason why the disaster shock has worked so beautifully, and I thought of this over and over again when I have our meetings, the multicultural aspect of this project is the best of all. It has the language translations that are significant, as Damien mentioned. They didn't want to speak to me in any of the agencies unless it was already translated in Spanish. That's New York City, coming to very definite ways of being translatable to a different language. One of the opportunities that I had was knowing that this was a proven manual already established as successful. And that made me feel I could market this for distribution in a very quick, very definite way. I also felt that the manual was also going to be available on digital for no cost, because most of the people that are the most vulnerable do not have an opportunity to, buy a book or to borrow one or to even be on internet. So the people that I've established a relationship with will have this in their own offices of mental health facilities, and they'll be able to download it. And actually, when they're doing their counseling in the shelters and things like that, they'll be able to use some of the significant tools and interventions. The other thing I thought about is that this particular distribution effort on our parts is making a better version of ourselves in a global way. We're not just one country giving this out to everyone. When I looked at the list of almost more sometimes to think that there'll be 100 volunteers. I look at all the countries and I say to myself, which Governor Cuomo says almost every night, we're all in this together. And this is what disaster shock represents. We're all in this together. Whatever we came up with, we thought about being useful to all different nationalities and languages, including different countries, of course. The significant part, I wanted to have a manual that was going to speak to the most vulnerable of our population. And whether that would be the United States or any other country, this is where people have the little knowledge of what simple things like the breathing techniques, like the visits of just different ways we could speak about disasters without making people more anxious, but giving them tools will be the most effective response. And I feel that when you join into a position that you could be a volunteer, it energizes you to hear everybody else what they're doing. So I felt what I had to do right away is go to my personal attachments to organizations that I belong to, which would be CAMF, which is American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, which is a national organization, but also has members all over the world, and also CAMP, which is the California model of MFT. It has 32,000 membership, and AMP has 25,000. So right away, when I called, the first one didn't go through as well as I wanted. They just said, well, we can't even do anything unless it's in Spanish. I called Damien, right away, it was up in Spanish. The next was California, and they said, what languages? And I said, well, it's in Chinese as well. And they were right on the spot. They called me the next day and said that they would put it up on all of their websites, and this goes out to everyone. Then I felt, okay, those are all the professionals. They'll disseminate it to their therapist. Now, what I really want to work on is the particular areas like what's most affected here in New York City, I'm sure population-wise everywhere else, is the shelters, the government agencies. So the government agency, I had to be very specific because it can get lost in a very easy place to throw it away until the next situation that comes up. And that was certain agencies that deal with mental health. The Thrive organization in New York City deals with people and their counselors are expert in 200 languages, if you can imagine. We're up to 20 languages. They're speaking to their population in New York City with 200 languages. So they were happy when I told them that we were up to 20 and still building. So that was why they said they'll put it out there to their counselors. Community access, the National Center for School Mental Health was the biggest one of all. Being a school-based family therapist for many, many, many years and still promoting that effort through different ways that Brian Gerard has established as the basis for a lot of different things that we're doing in the schools, they felt very connected to the fact that I had already been involved in school-based therapies. And they felt I understood the problems of principals and teachers alike. But more importantly, I was able to talk to superintendents in the New York City schools. And they just felt that they had a go-to person that would know how effective this could be within the school system. And last but not least, I looked at personal colleagues that they had asked me to do things for them. So I said, okay, it's show up time for the reverse. And I said, please, whatever colleagues you have to pass this on, I wasn't threatening them, but it was sort of, but please, please do this as a personal favor, in this good way of looking at it. And they were all happy to do it because they also are in a place where they feel, what can they do that is very instant gratification, will make a difference, and also look at the political end of ourselves as we are looking at this as the best version of ourselves in this particular time. And this is the best version of ourselves, to be thinking of somebody else besides ourselves. So if there's any questions about the distribution, please, my number's there. I have all the names and places and people that I've written to, both national and local. But I just want to let you know that looking at statistics, we have the dubious representation of the most numbers of deaths to this virus. So I feel that we can speak to the drama that's ensuing right now. And I think as of today, I wrote down the death toll. It's up to 20,000 in New York. And that's quite a since we have 8.5 million maybe, but every death counts, obviously. But these are not even counting the people that are probable causes. I personally have losses of therapists that were involved that have passed away. They just kept seeing clients, and we don't know where this came from. They had no health issues, but everybody could be affected. That's how I look at it. And New York City is a melting pot of the world, and how we're handling it is where I had asked before, how do the other parts of the United States and the countries look at us, what we're doing? Months ago, we were looking at Italy to see how they were faring and not thinking, and then we were looking at China to see how they were faring. And now people are looking at New York. And hopefully the numbers are going down very slightly as far as the cases, but still not certainly out of the woods. And politically, we're up against a battle as well with yes, let's open the doors for economy, and yes, close the doors because of our health issues. And I'm sure you're all doing that as well, looking at the differences of how we handle it. But we have a disaster shock manual that will at least make us go to sleep at night with knowing we did something worthwhile.
And Jackie, you live in New York, and you've
I live
actually,
in New York.
some of your family members actually got sick from the virus.
Yes, they
gotten
did.
better.
Definitely, yes. They had. It's amazing how we were all holding our breath. Two in the household, and one of our younger granddaughters were all sequestering, in the same area. And it was like, oh, touch and go, because my husband is an infectious disease physician, and he kept saying, oh, this is not going to be good. And then he's the older person, but the young person got sick. And so a lot of people survived this. It's really unreported cases that we don't even know the numbers yet. It'll happen in research. It'll be there someday. But for now, if you want your people that you love and know to be able to be helpful, just give them the manual, tell them to download it, send it to anybody they know, and it makes a big difference. Teachers, educators, healthcare workers, that's the obvious. But people that are just family members will be satisfied with this.
Jackie and I are both on the board of the University of San Francisco Center for Child and Family Development, and we work closely with the executive director of the center, Tony Namiya. And 3 weeks ago, 2 of Tony's relatives died of the COVID-19 virus, so we feel personally touched by that. This brings us to the close of our presentation, and we have time now for